What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses comes face to face with a host who's forgotten the meaning of respect? You won't believe what unfolds when Sandra Bullock sits down for what should have been a routine promotional interview, only to find herself trapped in a web of condescending questions and blatant disrespect that would make even the most seasoned celebrities walk away. This isn't just another awkward late-night moment. This is a career-defining confrontation that exposes the dark side of celebrity interviews and shows exactly what happens when power goes to someone's head. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when Hollywood's sweetheart finally reaches her breaking point. The stage was set like any other Tuesday night at the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio in Hollywood. The familiar neon lights cast their usual glow over the audience, who had no idea they were about to witness television history in the making. Sandra Bullock, promoting her latest film project, walked onto the stage with her characteristic grace and warm smile, waving to the enthusiastic crowd who erupted in cheers for the Academy Award-winning actress. She looked stunning in a navy blue blazer, her hair perfectly styled, every inch the professional she's always been known to be. Jimmy Kimmel, however, seemed different from the moment the cameras started rolling. There was something in his demeanor that felt off, a smugness that veteran talk show watchers might have noticed if they were paying close attention. As Sandra settled into the guest chair, adjusting her blazer and flashing that million-dollar smile to the audience, Kimmel's opening remarks carried an edge that would prove to be a warning sign of what was to come. "So Sandra Bullock," he began, his tone already dripping with what could only be described as barely concealed mockery. "Here to talk about another movie where you play the same character you always play, right? The quirky, lovable woman who somehow manages to save the day despite being completely out of her element." The audience laughed, but it was an uncomfortable laugh, the kind that happens when people aren't sure if they should be laughing at all. Sandra's smile faltered for just a moment, a micro-expression that revealed her surprise at the unexpected hostility. She recovered quickly, as professionals do, but something had shifted in the air. "Well, Jimmy," she replied, her voice steady but with a slight defensive edge, "I think that's a pretty reductive way to describe 25 years of work across multiple genres, don't you think? I mean, I've done everything from romantic comedies to serious dramas to action films. Each character brings something different to the table." Kimmel leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk spreading across his face. Not the charming one, his fans know, but something more sinister. "Oh, come on, Sandra. Let's be honest here. You've got a formula and you stick to it. There's nothing wrong with that, but let's not pretend you're Meryl Streep or anything." The comparison hit like a slap across the face. Sandra's composure, legendary in Hollywood circles, began to crack. Her hands, which had been resting casually on the arm of her chair, tightened into subtle fists. The audience fell silent, sensing that something was going terribly wrong. "I'm sorry. What exactly are you trying to say?" Sandra asked, her voice dropping to a lower register that anyone who knew her well would recognize as a danger sign. "Are you seriously sitting there in front of a live audience, comparing my work unfavorably to other actresses? Is that what passes for professional interviewing these days?" But Kimmel wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed to be enjoying the discomfort he was creating. "Look, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You do the same thing over and over again. The America's sweetheart routine, the aw-shucks personality, the whole 'I'm just a regular person' act. Don't you think audiences are getting tired of it?" The words hung in the air like poison gas. Sandra's jaw tightened visibly, and for a moment, the camera caught something in her eyes that viewers had never seen before. Pure, unadulterated anger. The woman who had charmed audiences for decades, who had navigated countless interviews with grace and humor, was being systematically torn down by a host who seemed to have forgotten that his job was to make his guests look good, not destroy them on national television. An act? Sandra repeated slowly, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying more weight than if she had shouted. You think my personality is an act? You think the person I've been for my entire career, the relationships I've built, the respect I've earned from my peers and my fans, you think that's all fake? The studio audience was now completely silent, some people looking around nervously, others staring at their phones, desperate to escape the increasingly uncomfortable situation unfolding before them. The camera operators continued to do their job, but even they seemed to be moving more cautiously, as if they too sensed that something was about to explode. Kimmel shrugged, as if the devastation he was causing was nothing more than casual conversation. I'm just saying, Sandra, that maybe it's time to show us something real. Drop the act. Be authentic for once. Your fans deserve better than this manufactured persona you've been selling them for years. And that's when Sandra Bullock did something that would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms within hours. She stood up, not the graceful, practiced movement of a seasoned talk show guest preparing for a commercial break, but the sharp, decisive movement of a woman who had reached her absolute limit. Her chair scraped against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the deadly quiet studio. Manufactured? She said, her voice now carrying a strength that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. You want to talk about manufactured, Jimmy? Let's talk about manufactured. The tension in the room had reached a breaking point, and everyone, from the production crew to the studio audience to the millions of viewers watching at home, could sense that what happened next would change everything. Sandra Bullock, America's sweetheart, was about to show the world exactly what happens when respect is thrown out the window and professionalism becomes a one-way street. Manufactured? Sandra repeated, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. You want to talk about manufactured, Jimmy? Let's talk about your entire career built on making fun of people who can't fight back. Let's talk about your manufactured outrage, your scripted spontaneous moments, your desperate attempts to stay relevant by tearing down people who've actually accomplished something in this industry. The color drained from Kimmel's face. This wasn't going according to whatever twisted script he had in his head. Sandra Bullock wasn't supposed to fight back. She was supposed to take the abuse with a smile, laugh it off, and give him the viral moment he was clearly fishing for. But standing there, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made everyone in the studio lean forward, she looked like a completely different person from the woman who had walked onto that stage just minutes earlier. Now hold on just a minute, Kimmel stammered, his smugness evaporating as he realized he had awakened something far more powerful than he had bargained for. I think you're overreacting here, Sandra. This is just a conversation. This is what we do on talk shows. We have conversations. Conversations? Sandra's laugh was sharp and humorless. Is that what you call systematically attempting to humiliate your guests? Is that what you call professional journalism? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a sad man who peaked years ago trying to get his kicks by bullying people who are supposed to trust him. The audience was completely silent now, some people actually covering their mouths in shock. A few audience members were frantically typing on their phones, clearly already posting about what they were witnessing. The camera operators exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut to commercial. But the ratings goldmine unfolding before them kept those cameras rolling. Kimmel tried to regain control, his voice rising with false authority. Look, Sandra, you're being way too sensitive here. If you can't handle a little bit of honest criticism, maybe you shouldn't be in show business. This is Hollywood, not kindergarten. That was the moment everything exploded. Sandra's eyes flashed with a fury that seemed to transform her entire presence. She took a step closer to Kimmel's desk, and her voice dropped to a deadly calm that was somehow more terrifying than if she had screamed. Honest criticism? She said, each word delivered with surgical precision. Jimmy, let me tell you about honest criticism. Honest criticism comes from a place of knowledge and respect. Honest criticism is constructive. What you're doing right now isn't criticism. It's character assassination disguised as entertainment. And frankly, it's pathetic. The production crew behind the cameras was now in full panic mode. The show's producer was frantically gesturing from the wings, but it was clear that both host and guest had moved far beyond the point where anyone could control what was happening. This was live television, at its most raw and unpredictable. Kimmel, his face now flushed red with embarrassment and anger, made the fatal mistake of doubling down. You know what, Sandra? Maybe the truth hurts. Maybe after all these years of everyone kissing your ass and telling you how wonderful you are, you can't handle someone actually being honest with you. Maybe that's the real problem here. The words hit Sandra like a physical blow, but instead of retreating, she seemed to grow stronger. Her posture straightened, her voice gained power, and when she spoke again, it was with the authority of someone who had spent decades earning respect in one of the most brutal industries in the world. The truth? She said, her voice now carrying across the entire studio. You want to talk about truth, Jimmy? Here's some truth for you. I've been in this business for over 2 decades. I've worked with some of the most talented directors, actors, and writers in the world. I've won awards, I've been nominated for awards, and I've consistently delivered performances that audiences connect with. That's not an accident, and it's not luck. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing with devastating precision. But more importantly, I've built a career on treating people with respect. I show up prepared. I treat crew members. Like human beings, I remember people's names, and I understand that this industry only works when we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but Sandra wasn't finished. She was on a roll now, years of professionalism and diplomacy finally giving way to raw, unfiltered honesty. You sit behind this desk every night, making jokes at other people's expense, thinking that somehow makes you clever or important. But what have you actually contributed to this industry besides cynicism and negativity? When was the last time you created something that brought joy to people's lives, instead of just mocking what other people have created? The studio audience was now completely captivated, some people actually gasping at the brutal honesty unfolding before them. This wasn't just a celebrity having a bad interview. This was a masterclass in how to dismantle someone's entire persona on live television. Kimmel, clearly rattled and desperate to regain some semblance of control, made another crucial error. You know what, Sandra? You're right. You're absolutely right. You are America's sweetheart. You're perfect. You never make mistakes. You never have a bad day. You're just this perfect little angel who floats above the rest of us mere mortals. Is that what you want to hear? The sarcasm in his voice was so thick it could have been cut with a knife, and it was clear that he thought he was delivering some kind of killing blow. But Sandra just smiled. Not the warm, familiar smile that had charmed audiences for years, but something cold and calculating that made everyone in the room realize that Jimmy Kimmel had just made a terrible, career-altering mistake. Perfect? Sandra said, her voice now carrying a dangerous edge that made the hair on the back of everyone's neck stand up. Jimmy, I never claimed to be perfect, but I'll tell you what I am. She paused, and the silence stretched out like a taut wire ready to snap. Every person in that studio was holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. Sandra Bullock, the woman who had gracefully navigated decades of Hollywood politics, who had weathered personal scandals and professional setbacks with dignity, was about to unleash something that no one in that room would ever forget. I'm professional, she continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. I'm prepared. I'm respectful to everyone I work with, from the biggest stars to the craft services crew. I show up on time, I know my lines, and I treat this industry, and the people in it, with the respect they deserve. And most importantly, I understand that my success comes from lifting others up, not from tearing them down for cheap laughs. Kimmel's face was now a mask of barely controlled rage and embarrassment. He had clearly expected this interview to go very differently. Perhaps he thought he could get a few viral moments at Sandra's expense, maybe generate some controversy. That would get people talking about his show again. Instead, he had awakened a force that was systematically destroying his credibility on live television. "You know what your problem is, Jimmy?" Sandra continued, now fully in control of the room. "You've forgotten what this job actually is. You think being a talk show host means you get to be the star, that you get to make yourself look good by making your guests look bad. But that's not how this works. Your job is to make your guests shine, to give them a platform to connect with, their audience, to create moments that people will remember for the right reasons." The audience was completely transfixed. Some people were recording on their phones, others were just staring in amazement at the complete reversal of power dynamics playing out before them. The woman they had come to see promote a movie had instead delivered a masterclass in professionalism and integrity. "Instead," Sandra said, her voice now carrying the weight of someone who had clearly been thinking about this for a long time, "you've turned this into some kind of gladiator arena where you think you can ambush people who trust you enough to come on your show. You've forgotten that these aren't your enemies. They're your guests. They're here to help you, to give you content, to make your show successful." Kimmel finally found his voice, but it came out as a strangled whisper. "Sandra, I think you're really overreacting here. This is just entertainment. People expect a little bit of edge, a little bit of controversy." "Entertainment?" Sandra's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Jimmy, I've been entertaining people for 25 years. I know what entertainment looks like. This isn't entertainment, this is cruelty. This is a man who's forgotten how to be decent using his platform to hurt people because he thinks it makes him look clever." She took another step closer to his desk, and now she was close enough that the cameras caught every detail of her expression. The disappointment, the anger, and underneath it all, a deep sadness that this was what late-night television had become. "You want to know what's really sad about this whole situation?" Sandra said, her voice dropping to a more intimate level that somehow made her words even more devastating. "I actually used to respect you. I used to think you were one of the good ones. I thought you understood that this industry works best when we support each other, when we celebrate each other's successes instead of trying to tear each other down." The words hit Kimmel like physical blows. His face went through a series of emotions: anger, embarrassment, something that might have been shame. But it was too late to back down now. Too late to salvage this disaster of an interview. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "This is my show. I set the tone here." "You're absolutely right," Sandra said, her voice suddenly calm and controlled. "This is your show, and you've just shown everyone exactly what kind of host you really are. You've shown them that you're willing to ambush guests who trust you, that you think professional courtesy is optional, and that you believe your job is to make people feel small instead of helping them feel welcomed." She straightened up, smoothing down her blazer with a gesture that somehow managed to be both elegant and dismissive. "But here's the thing, Jimmy. I don't have to sit here and be part of it." The studio fell into absolute silence. Even the cameras seemed to stop moving as everyone realized what was about to happen. Sandra Bullock, one of the most beloved actresses in Hollywood, was about to walk off a major talk show in the middle of a live broadcast. "You know what I am, Jimmy?" Sandra said, echoing her words from earlier. "I'm someone who knows her worth. I'm someone who understands that respect is earned, not demanded. And I'm someone who refuses to be anyone's punching bag, no matter how big their platform is." She turned to face the audience, and her expression softened slightly as she addressed them directly. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this. You came here expecting to have a good time, to maybe learn something about a movie I'm proud of, and instead you got to see what happens when basic human decency goes out the window." The audience was completely silent, but there was something in their faces, a mixture of admiration and shock, that suggested they understood exactly what they had just witnessed. Sandra turned back to Kimmel one final time. "Jimmy, I hope you figure out what kind of person you want to be. Because right now, you're not someone I want to share a stage with." And with that, she began to walk toward the exit. But she wasn't done yet. She paused at the edge of the stage, turned back one final time, and delivered the final blow that would be quoted across social media for weeks to come. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about me playing the same character over and over again. And you're right about one thing. I do play the same character in every movie. I play someone who treats people with dignity and respect, someone who believes in doing the right thing even when it's difficult, someone who understands that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. And you know what? I'm proud of that character. At least when people see me on screen, they see someone they can look up to." The silence that followed was deafening. Sandra Bullock, America's sweetheart, had just delivered one of the most devastating takedowns in talk show history. She had turned what was supposed to be her humiliation into Kimmel's complete destruction. And she had done it with a grace and dignity that made her previous work look like child's play. Without another word, she walked off the stage, her heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown to the end of Jimmy Kimmel's credibility. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether they should applaud or just sit there in shock. Kimmel sat behind his desk, his face a mask of humiliation and defeat. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of his devastation. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, that might salvage the situation, but no words came. What could he possibly say after being so thoroughly and completely demolished by someone who had just shown the entire world what real class looked like? The show's producer finally stepped in, frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. In the span of 15 minutes, Sandra Bullock had transformed from interview guest to avenging angel, delivering a masterclass in how to handle a bully while maintaining your dignity and integrity. As the cameras finally stopped rolling, the only sound in the studio was the echo of Sandra's footsteps as she disappeared backstage, leaving behind a host who had just learned the hard way that some people are beloved for very good reasons, and that respect, once lost, is almost impossible to get back.